Hi, and thanks for the nice introduction, Stephanie. So as Stephanie already alluded to, I'm substituting for my co-author, Haocheng Wang, who unfortunately was not able to come to this conference due to visa issues. But yeah, I'm excited to present recent work on modeling naturalistic conversations using deep multimodal language models. So yeah, first I want to thank my supervisors Uri Hasson and Ariel Goldstein, as well as collaborators at Princeton, Google Research, and Adine Flinker's lab at NYU. This is a big project that really wouldn't be possible without the effort and collaboration of many individuals across different institutions, so a big thank you here. So how do we study speech processing in the brain? Given this simple sentence, I'm fine, we can use linguistics to break it down into different puzzle pieces. And using clever experiments, we can model each piece in the brain, hoping to eventually integrate these puzzle pieces back into a comprehensive model of human speech processing. However, there are a few drawbacks to this paradigm. The models developed in experimental settings often fail to generalize to the real world, where language use is dynamic, multidimensional, and highly contextual, right? So even the simple sentence, I'm fine, conveys different meanings under different circumstances. So here it's a normal greeting, meaning that you feel pretty good. If you change the context, you might want to convey that you're actually not feeling good at all. You can also change it to a completely different setting where a doctor asks a patient, and here I'm fine might refer to physical health more than emotional. So furthermore, there are interactions between those different puzzle pieces, both in natural language and potentially in the brain. So thus, we need to model those puzzle pieces holistically in real-world settings. And to that end, we collected unconstrained conversational speech and concurrent ECoG recordings from 4 epileptic patients during their 1-week stay at the hospital. This is a uniquely naturalistic data set. The patients were engaged in spontaneous conversations with their family, friends, and medical staff, and each conversation is completely spontaneous and unique. We recorded 100 hours of speech recordings in total, which amounts to about 500,000 words. And we obtained neural signals from a total of 670 intracranial electrodes covering different brain areas in the left hemisphere. So how do we model such an extensive data set? Deep learning provides us with an alternative and unified computational framework to study human speech processing. We use Whisper. This is a full transformer model for speech transcription, and it's trained end-to-end to map speech segments onto word-level tokens and predict the next token given the preceding already transcribed tokens. Deep neural nets are often thought of as black boxes where some input goes in and some output comes out. However, we can actually look under the hood and analyze the computations and representations inside those models. And to take a closer look, we separate the connections between the encoder and the decoder modules. And then we feed the audio recordings from our dataset into the encoder and the corresponding transcripts into the decoder. And then we extract the internal activations or embeddings from the upper layers of the encoder and the decoder. And effectively, this gives us multidimensional spaces encoding different speech-relevant features. So to look into what kind of information is represented in those feature spaces, we use t-SNE to project them into 2-dimensional manifolds, and so here each point corresponds to a unique word in our dataset, and we color it according to the first phoneme in a word or the part of speech tag. And we see that for embeddings extracted from the encoder network, there's a clustering for phonetic categories, but not for part of speech categories. And for embeddings extracted from the decoder network, we see the opposite pattern. So basically what we see is that those embeddings extracted from different architectural parts of the model encode different feature spaces. And we refer to the embeddings extracted from the encoder stack as speech embeddings because here low-level speech-relevant features are represented, and in the decoder embeddings, high-level lexical features, and this is why we refer to those embeddings as language embeddings. So now we have our data set of unconstrained conversations and concurrent neural activity, and we divide the data into comprehension, where the patient was listening, and production, where the patient was spontaneously producing speech. So we have the Whisper model and the extracted speech and language embeddings. And now to test how those different feature spaces are represented in the brain, we construct two sets of electrode-wise encoding models based on speech and language embeddings, doing both speech comprehension and speech production. We use linear regression to learn a mapping between the embeddings and the neural signal. And to evaluate the encoding model performance, we calculate the correlation between the predicted and actual neural signal for left out conversations. And this process was repeated for each electrode and each 25 millisecond lag, giving us a time course of encoding performance from -2 to 2 seconds around word onset. To compare between the encoding models, we employ a variance partitioning paradigm. So we train a third encoding model where we concatenate both speech and language embeddings, and then we can derive the proportion of variance that is uniquely explained by either speech or language embeddings. And we can color electrodes accordingly using this two-dimensional color map, right? So electrodes colored in red are better explained by speech embeddings, and electrodes colored in blue are better explained by language embeddings. So during comprehension, high-level language areas, including IFG, PMTG, and angular gyrus, show a preference for language embeddings, while sensory motor areas along precentral and postcentral gyrus and perceptual areas such as STG show a preference for speech embeddings. And during speech production, we observe a similar pattern. What we also observe is that selectivity in those individual electrodes is mixed, meaning that in high-level areas such as IFG, there are also low-level features showing a good correlation, and in areas such as pre-central gyrus and post-central gyrus and STG, we also observe a good encoding performance for high-level lexical features. Because of the high spatial-temporal resolution of our analysis, we can also look at the time course of encoding performance. And in line with our expectations, we see a encoding peak after word onset for speech comprehension and encoding peak before word onset for speech production. And interestingly, we observe, during speech production, we observe a double encoding peak in some electrodes, especially in sensory motor areas, where encoding peaks before and after word onset. So what does this second encoding peak after word onset mean? And the idea here is that this kind of represents some auditory feedback mechanism during speech production. And to test this, we trained an encoding model on comprehension data. So here a specific mapping to comprehension-related processes is learned, and then we test whether this model generalizes to held-out production data. And interestingly, we observed that this comprehension-specific encoding model explains the second peak after word onset, but not the first peak before word onset in sensory motor areas, in STG, and in IFG. And this results really suggests a shared mechanism between articulation and perception processes in spontaneous speech production. Next, we compared deep models as an alternative framework for modeling human speech processing with traditional symbolic models. So we vectorized symbolic low-level speech features and high-level linguistic features into binarized vectors. And this allows us to evaluate those symbolic models against our contextual embeddings in the same regression-based encoding framework. And our findings indicate that speech and language embeddings extracted from the deep speech-to-text model significantly outperform symbolic speech and language features in predicting neural activity during our unconstrained natural conversations. So to conclude, using those embeddings extracted from deep models that are trained end-to-end on real-world speech, we obtain a better feed to neural recordings compared to symbolic models using isolated linguistic features. We show a distributed cortical hierarchy of speech processing where individual electrodes show mixed selectivity to speech and language relevant feature spaces. And we show that deep language models can serve as a computation framework for modeling speech processing without compromising the rich dynamics and contextual qualities inherent in real-world language. And this allows us to ask further questions, for example, about the temporal dynamics of speech processing or the interaction between production and comprehension-related processes. So yeah, we have some more results and analysis to show, and if you're interested, feel free to stop by our poster, number 1053, during the poster session this afternoon. And there's also a QR code linking to our preprint. Thank you.
Thank you very much. One question that I actually also wanted to ask again is, could you explain again exactly what the speech and language models encode respectively? How do they differ?
Yeah, maybe let's go back to the... So basically, those embeddings are just like extract from different parts of the like full transformer model, right? And what we do in order to test the information that is encoded here is we basically use Tisney to project them into those two-dimensional spaces, and then we color the unique word embeddings according to phonetic categories or the part of speech categories, right? So this is kind of like the idea here that we use different, like, look at different levels of like speech and language relevant feature spaces. And this is only like basically a visual clustering that we observe, but we also do like logistic regression classification analysis to really like show that they are this like different information encoded in those embeddings.
Cool, thanks. A follow-up question by myself, if I may. I was kind of surprised to see that the anterior temporal lobe seems to prefer speech over language. This is kind of at odds with the typical idea, right, that the anterior temporal lobe is kind of the semantic hub. Can you say something about this?
Yeah, this is a very good question, and we were also surprised to see that. So especially also like we see it for speech production, right, and not so much in speech comprehension, which is also interesting, I think. Again, I think I can also just reiterate what like Sam mentioned before. We are looking into like speech processing in like naturalistic conversations, so maybe there's more going on that we cannot really capture with looking into those processes in isolation in controlled experiments. But yeah, that's only speculation at this point, and we were also surprised to see it. So yeah.
Hi, thank you for the talk. I was wondering also, following the previous talk, have you looked also into the right hemisphere, or are you planning to look into the right hemisphere?
So for the 4 patients that we have pre-processed so far, electrode coverage is just better on the left hemisphere, so that's why we just chose to look at the left hemisphere. But we have actually many more patients lined up waiting to be pre-processed, so up to 60 patients. So we can have also like a pretty good coverage on the right hemisphere, and that's definitely something that would be interesting to look into the future. Yeah.
Thank you very much.